Top 51 games of all time, number 10 to number 1. Come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the board gaming hobby, and in this video series we're covering my top 51 games of all time. In this video we made it to the top. We're covering number 10 to number 1. These are my absolute favorite games, the games that I really enjoy a whole bunch, and these are the games that are going to stay in my collection probably forever. These are games that are enjoyable at multiple player counts and multiple different varieties, multiple different strategies, and multiple different tactics, and some of these games are quite a treasure, especially when we start talking about number 10. Number 10 on the list, and a treasure, and not just because it comes in a treasure chest style game box, is going to be the game of Dungeon Lords. Now, Dungeon Lords is a game for 2 to 4 players. This is a worker placement game with a whole bunch of humor and a whole bunch of fun thrown into one big, well, in this case, one big treasure chest, because I was lucky enough to get the Kickstarter special anniversary edition of the game. But the basic idea of the game is this game is spiritually influenced by the classic game of Dungeon Keeper. Now, back in the late 90s, there was a very famous developer for PC games called Peter Molyneux, who was part of a company called Bullfrog. And basically back in those days, if a game came up from Bullfrog or had the name Peter Molyneux on the game, you basically ran out there and got the game because you knew it was going to be a fantastic game if you enjoyed that style of gameplay. What Vlaada Chvátil has done is taken the classic gameplay from that classic game of Dungeon Keeper from the late 90s and managed to box that all up and put that into a fantastic board game that plays fantastically. And what it does is it takes a whole bunch of humor and a whole bunch of theme to create this wonderful, fantastic, enjoyable gameplay experience. You see, in the game of Dungeon Lords, like the classic game Dungeon Keeper is spiritually inspired by, you get to play the bad guy. Nope, I take it back. You get to play the misunderstood Dungeon Lord who is just trying to create a nice, wonderful home for all the bad guys. Nope, not the bad guys. The misunderstood dungeon denizens. Nope, not denizens. Okay, I'm stealing all the jokes from Dungeon Lords right here, right now. But the basic idea of the game is this is a worker placement game where every single player is going to take actions based on cards in their hand. You're going to play these cards out face down, and then all the players are going to reveal their cards at the same time. They're going to judge the actions they're going to do on a worker placement board. Then you're going to send your worker out to these various different locations that allow you to take different actions. Now, all these different actions are going to help you do various different things, but the basic idea of the game is you're trying to protect your dungeon from these horrible heroes who are going to come attack your poor defenseless dungeon, because that's what heroes happen to like to do. And all you're trying to do with this dungeon is just make a nice, safe, wonderful location for all these monsters to live and have wonderful, safe lives. Okay, I'm stealing those jokes again, but hey, that's okay in this instance. But the basic idea of the game is you are going to set up your dungeon every single time you play the game, and you're going to modify your dungeon through different actions. You're going to send your imps out there to go do different things. They're going to help you get resources. And every single game is played out over 2 years. Every year is broken down into seasons, and every one of these seasons, various different things are going to happen. But the basic thing that you're trying to do is you're just trying to protect your dungeon, because eventually at the end of every single season, these horrible adventurers are going to come attack your dungeon. They're going to pillage it, they're going to break down all your hard work, they're going to scare off all your monsters, make life miserable for you as a dungeon keeper. So your basic idea of the game is this is a worker placement game where the player is working competitively to have the most powerful dungeon while controlling the evil meter, because if you get way too darn evil in this game, you know eventually the paladin is going to come after your wonderful dungeon and they're going to wreak havoc against you. Of course, unless you want to become super evil and just invite the paladin because you want to smash him in little bits because he was a thorn in your side last time you played the game and you want to get those extra victory points, but that's totally besides the point. This is a fantastic worker game. This is a game that's basically an evergreen, a game that is going to stay and survive throughout the years, because it's a game that's always enjoyable every time you play it. This is a game that has enough depth of strategy, plus enough replay variety thanks to the way that the game is going to play differently depending on the way the monsters are going to come out, the way the hero is going to come out, the different strategies that are available for this game, and all the wonderful enjoyment you're going to get out of this game. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is a game that just played 2 to 4 players, but is pretty much at its best as a 4-player game. It's still extremely enjoyable as a 3-player game, but as a 2-player game, I probably wouldn't play this game unless I just really want to show a new player how to enjoy this game, because this is also a rich, deep strategy game that's going to reward enjoyment. It's going to reward players who are going to learn the deep strategies of the game, and this is a game that's going to be very rewarding to players who are going to take the time to learn the deep strategies and the tactics of this very deep strategic game. That's the game of Dungeon Lords. Number 9, and jumping up from number 16, is going to be Race for the Galaxy. the best tableau building game I've ever played, and this is one of those games that I can honestly say between the basic card game itself and the Kildin AI on the PC, this is probably the game that I have the absolute most plays out of any single game I've ever owned. I think it's probably safe to say, if you're willing to include Kildin AI and the actual app that I purchased also, I might be approaching well over 1,000 plays of this game. So this is a game that I enjoy absolutely. This is a game that I've enjoyed for many, many years, and this is a game that is never, ever going to leave my collection. The basic idea of Race for the Galaxy is every single player has their basic hand of cards, and they're going to be using their hand of cards to do various different things, such as exploring planets, or I should just say colonizing, conquering planets, however you want to say it, building different things to help their empire spread across lands. But the whole idea is basically just a tableau building game. Very interesting thing about the game, though, is that every single player on their turn before any actions are taken is going to have a hand of action cards. Now, every single player is going to take one of the action cards in their hand, and they're going to play it face down. Once all the players have placed their action card face down, everybody's going to reveal their action card. And here's the interesting thing about the game. Everybody gets to take every single action that's been played or decided between the 5 different actions available in the game, as long as that action card has been played by at least one player. The bonus is, though, if you are the player who actually played the card that creates that action for that round, you and you alone is going to get an extra special bonus. Now, that also means that if multiple players are playing, more than 2, 3, 4, whatever you want to say, this game does play all the way up to 6 players if you wanted to do so. But the thing is, if multiple players play the actual one card, and then each player plays that card is also going to get that bonus, not just one person only. But the players who do not play a specific action card are going to get a lesser form of that action. So this game has multiple layers of gameplay to it because it's kind of a psychological game mixed in with a tableau building game. Because every single round you're going to look at your hand of cards and you know exactly what you want to do, because you're going to go, I have this planet, I have these resources, I have all these things right here, I could do a trade action, but if I get more planets out and do a really big trade action, I'm going to get a lot of victory points, I'm probably going to win the game here, or at least get ahead in the victory points. So you can look at what all the other players have on their tableau and they go, okay, this person over here could really take advantage of an explore action, so it's probably not going to be a good idea for me to explore this round because I really don't need to explore. So look at all my other actions available to me. This would be a great round for me to go ahead and take a settle action, but I also see that this player over here also needs some planets and they keep on eyeing towards me also, so maybe they're going to do a settle action. So maybe I don't want to do a settle action. Maybe what I want to do is I want to do a trade or consume action. So you have this nice, wonderful psychological gameplay going on because you're trying to read every single other player at the table, figure out what actions they're going to take, because this is a game that's also about the economy of actions. Because this is a game that plays very quickly. It is very, very easy to get a game down, a Race for the Galaxy, in 30 minutes or less. Even if you're playing with 4 players, it is very easy. That's how many turns and quick actions. I would probably say, not just try and talk as advanced players, probably very common in this game in 10 rounds or less. Maybe 12 rounds. Again, I don't want to confuse people who are new to the game, and if they take more than 12 rounds to go, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. Because this is definitely a game that's going to grow with you. This is a game that rewards smart gameplay. This is also a game that's going to reward experienced play. It is so darn easy for an experienced player to absolutely trounce a new player in this game. I'm not saying just beat him by a couple points. You can absolutely decimate a new player in this game because this game has so many levels of strategy. Kind of has a little bit of a poker mechanic in the game because there's a little bit of bluffing and knowing how the other players work. There's also the strategy of knowing just what kind of cards are in the game and what kind of combos are in the game. And this is also a game where you have to not be afraid to sacrifice cards. Because the other thing I didn't explain to you about this game is your hand of cards is not only the cards you're going to play, but it's also your resources you're going to bring to purchase these cards, because all these cards have a cost. And to pay that cost, you need to discard other cards from your hand. So knowing the cards are available, knowing just how valuable certain cards are in your hand, and knowing just the combinations you can create just in your tableau can create such an evolving gameplay experience. Race for the Galaxy is my absolute 100% favorite tableau building game. It's number 9 on my list for a fantastic reason. This is a wonderful game that's years old, but it's also a game that's going to stay in my collection for a long, long time because it's just that great. That's the game of Race for the Galaxy. Number 8, and dropping ever so slightly by 4 points from number 4, is going to be the game of Kemet. Now, Kemet is the absolute best dudes on the map DOM style game you ever play for 2 to 5 players. And there's many, many reasons why it's the best game, but I'm just going to cover a couple of them very, very quickly. The basic idea of Kemet is the players are racing to be the first person to get a certain amount of victory points and then lock in those victory points. That's one of the key things about the game, because a lot of victory points, some of them are permanent, some of them are fluid, and you only keep those victory points as long as you keep certain board state conditions active. If you lose those board state conditions, you're also going to lose those victory points. So this is a very basic idea of a game that takes so many mechanics and melds them together to create a game that's just so absolutely fantastic that actually rewards aggressive behavior. This is a game where you cannot play this game overly defensive, because playing this game overly defensive is pretty much going to ensure that you're going to lose the game. Now, it's not impossible to win as a defensive player, but most likely you're going to lose the game because a lot of your victory points are gained by going out there and doing exploration and doing aggressive actions against the other players. Now, the game starts off very interesting right from the beginning of the game, because if you have the expansion, and there's no reason not to have the expansion, because it's one of the best things about this game is what the expansion adds to the game. The basic idea of the game of Kemet is you're trying to dominate the lands to get the most amount of victory points, but at the start of the game, you're going to pick 3 of 4 different pyramids to represent your empire. Now, these are the blue pyramid, the red pyramid, the white pyramid, and the black pyramid, but every single one of these pyramids is going to represent a certain different amount of powers that you can purchase. Now, if you don't control a certain color of pyramid, you cannot purchase those powers unless you can attack a player who actively has one of those pyramids. And as long as you can control that pyramid from the other players, you can also have access to those powers. But at the start of the game, you can only pick 3 pyramids. So at the start of the game, let's say this player wants to pick the red pyramid, the blue pyramid, and then the black pyramid. That means unless they attack another player's white pyramid, they'll never have access to the white powers. And you see that there's many different kinds of powers that are available for each one of these special powers of pyramids, and these are first come, first served powers. Once you buy that power, that is a power that's available to your empire. And these powers are certain different things, such as more attack strength, the ability to move faster, the ability to have more actions. I'm going to cover why actions are so important in this game in just a second. But the basic idea of this game is you're trying to improve your empire so you can move and attack other players and gain victory points by attacking them. Now, here's one of the first things that's so great about this game. There's no dice in this game. This is completely 100% diceless combat, because to incorporate combat in this game, you're going to look at your hand of combat cards. Now, every single player has a hand of combat cards, and the interesting thing about this game is when you go into combat, you're going to pick 2 of the combat cards in your hand. One of them you're going to play face down, and the other one you're going to discard. And you're not going to get this discarded card back until you go through your entire combat hand. So some of these combat cards are good for offense, some of these combat cards are good for defense, some of these combat cards are kind of a combination of both. So the cards you're going to play, you have to watch when you're playing these cards, because you don't want to throw out all your great offensive cards in the beginning, because they're going to become a sitting duck, because the players all around the table know exactly what cards you're playing, because there's not a lot of combat cards in this game. And I don't want to say you're going to be card counting, but it's pretty easy to card count in this game, because you look at another player and say, they just blew their most powerful attack card. I know who my next victim is on my turn when my turn comes around. So you're going to play these cards down. Both these players get to play these cards, and you're going to reveal, and that's going to produce combat results. Whether you're going to lose units, whether you use territory or various different things. But on top of that, players can sneak in divine intervention cards, because when they play this card, they'll simply play this card underneath it without the other player knowing. Well, you can probably catch the other player playing it. But the cool thing is the other player doesn't know what your divine intervention card is, and some of these divine intervention cards can actually make some differences in the combat. So you have some extra sneaky tactics and some extra strategies in the game. But on top of this, what's really interesting about this game is this is an action selection game where you're going to take various different actions, and you only have a certain amount of actions available to you every single round. And once you use an action, you can't use that action anymore. And not only that, there's kind of a pyramid system here where you have to use at least one action from every single level. So I couldn't just burn all my action cubes over here on this level and ignore the other levels, because you have to make sure you're mixing it up just a little bit. And on top of that, every one of these actions and everything you're going to do costs power. The way you gain power in this game is by controlling these pyramids. So these pyramids and these different temples are very strong structures that everybody is fighting for, because the more power you have, you guessed it, the more ability you can do for actions. The more actions you have, the more of these special action cards you can get, the more aggressive you can get, the more victory points you can get, and the better your chances of winning the game. Now right here, I only have the original version of Kemet. Kemet actually came with a version 1.5, which they say streamlined the rules a little bit, but I never had a problem with the rules. I enjoy the basic rules for the game itself. I actually do like the expansion for it that allows you to have the extra faction powers, and the pre-strat right here can cause some extra different strategies for the game. Now, me personally, I don't always use a pre-strat. I actually prefer the game just with the basic board with all 4 of the potential pyramid factions, because I think that adds a lot of extra strategy right from the beginning of the game, where you can pick the pyramids that give you access to certain powers, which will kind of telegraph in a way the actions that will be available for you for the rest of the game. Because like we see the red player, we see that they'll never have access to the white special powers, and all these white powers right here, we know they go to a certain strategic tactic.
For example, red is all about offense, blue is all about defense, white is all about gaining extra actions and extra power for those actions. So you see that we already see that those red players kind of decide what kind of strategy they want to go for. So Kemet is an absolutely fantastic game. It's number 8 in my top 51 games of all time. A wonderful, fantastic dudes on a map style game.
Number 7 and moving absolutely nowhere is Robinson Crusoe, which was number 7 on my list last time. And it's probably going to be number 7 or higher on my list in the future because this is the absolute 100% best cooperative game ever designed. Yes, I said it's the best cooperative game ever designed because this is truly the best cooperative game ever designed. In the game of Robinson Crusoe, this is a cooperative game where players are going to play through various different scenarios. And I should actually mention, this is a game that plays from 1 to 4 players. It's an action selection game, yada, yada, yada. Players are trying to do things, blah, 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 blah. Going to ignore all that boring stuff because I'm going to get to the cool parts of why this game is so darn awesome. The game of Robinson Crusoe is a game that's a scenario-based game where the players need to cooperatively survive through a complete scenario. Now, these scenarios are doing various different things, such as the classic story Robinson Crusoe, just try and survive on an island. Or maybe you're trying to make it through an entire year and just try to build a big enough signal fire to get safe from the island. Maybe you're trying to do a fun, interesting version of the whole King Kong story where you're trying to find Kong himself. Maybe it's a haunted island where you're trying to find all these different spiritual locations to try to get rid of the ghosts. Well, instead of me just rambling on about all these different things, why don't I show you all the different scenarios, including cannibal islands, classic stuff, or even various different things that are based on various different parts of history. Because the game designer of this was truly inspired from classic novels and classic history to create this wonderful board gaming experience. In the game of Robinson Crusoe, you're basically going to pick your scenario and then your whole objective is to survive the scenario. I'll just go and take the very first scenario that comes with the game because this game does come with multiple scenarios. The very first scenario, all you need to do is create enough stockpile of wood to survive a whole year on this deserted island. And after a year, you're going to build a big enough bonfire to signal a ship to go ahead and rescue. It's never that easy because in the game of Robinson Crusoe, this is a game of ultimate survival. Every single player is going to control one single survivor. And every one of these survivors has special abilities and special powers, and they also have a life track. So the way you're going to win this game is by completing the scenario. The way you're going to lose this game is many different ways, and the game is going to ramp up the difficulty every single time you play the game. Because if any one of our survivors manages to get defeated, all of our players are going to lose. And I might as well just throw this out there really quickly. This is a game that has a lot of extra things thrown into the game just to make sure everybody's having a lot of fun. For the simple fact that you have double-sided character cards, male, female on each side. The fact that there's a wonderful amount of components in this game, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I want to talk about the gameplay itself. But the basic idea of the game is you're trying to complete this scenario. And there's so many things that go into completing a scenario and just trying to survive. The basic thing you'll need to do is you'll need to explore the island to go ahead and get resources. Okay, that's not the basic thing you need to do. That's just one thing you need to do. Because the basic thing you need to do is you need to build a whole bunch of different things that are going to allow you to survive the island, because you are going to build various different technologies or things such as maps, dams, cures. But that's not all you need to do, because you also need to go out there and you need to hunt. Why you need to hunt? Because you need food. So you need to go out there and you need to hunt for all these different things. But that's not all you need to do, because you need to go out there and figure out how to build these things. You need to explore the island itself. But that's not all you need to do. You need to survive this adventure deck, which is continually advancing and creating different challenges. But that's not all you need to do. Every time you do something out here, you may be rolling dice, and these dice are going to force you to add cards to this adventure deck. And these cards are going to cause you to make decisions. These cards are going to tempt you. They're going to give you bonuses. They're going to say, hey, here's this wonderful little thing that you need really, really badly. And it's going to come up right now. But don't worry, nothing's going to happen to you if you take this card. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to shuffle this card into your adventure deck. Oh yeah, if the card comes back, something terrible is going to happen to you. So this game, I'm trying to be tongue-in-cheek here and be kind of funny about this. But what I'm telling you here, this is a game that is so perfectly balanced and so perfectly designed to create so many fantastic mechanics that meld together, go ahead and create something that's so much greater than the whole of its parts. This is a game that has a fantastic amount of replay. It has a fantastic amount of variety. It is a very, very challenging game. I'm not going to lie to you. This is a game that I've been playing since, I think this game came out in 2012 or maybe 2013. Somebody's going to have to correct me there. But this is one of those games that I was right there in the beginning, back when this was an original Z-Man Productions, because I got the game all the way back then. And I am still playing this game. I'm still having a lot of fun with this game. And this is a game I'm still enjoying ever so much. Even when you throw in the Mystery Tales expansion, which changes the gameplay just a little bit,
or even if you throw in the treasure chest, which again is going to add a little more variety and a little more gameplay to this fantastic, wonderful cooperative game. Robinson Crusoe is an absolutely fantastic game design. It is the best cooperative game I've ever played, and I'm still going to sit here and say this is probably the best cooperative game ever designed out of any cooperative games out there in the marketplace. The game of Robinson Crusoe, number 7 in my top 51 games of all time.
Number 6, and moving up from number 10, is the game of Through the Ages, a game for 2 to 4 players of civilization building where players are going to play out through 4 ages. In the game of civilizations, the players are competing to create the best empire at the end of the game. Whoever has the most victory points through science and through development and various different things is going to end up being the winner of the game. At the start of the game, every single player is going to play through the first age, and we're going to play through the first age through all these different ages, and every single age is going to represent various different periods of history. The basic idea of the game is you're going to have this track right here, and at the start of the game, you're going to fill this track with different things, such as famous leaders. Maybe you're going to get different kinds of advanced forms of resources, or maybe you're even going to get some classic great wonders of the world, or maybe even end up getting certain things such as in ways to increase your philosophy, ways to increase your science, or maybe you may increase your government from despotism to more advanced governments such as democracy or everything along those lines. But the basic idea of the game is players are trying to evolve their civilization throughout the years, while different things are happening, such as potential wars or different things, or terrorists coming out there to conquest, or different things along those lines, because this is a game that allows players to interact with each other. Players can go to war against each other because wars are going to occasionally come up. And if your empire is not ready for the war, your empire is slowly going to regress and it's going to lose its slow advance throughout history. And this is a game that's a very extremely tight economy game, because this is not a game where you can just rush ahead with the worries of your economy, because rushing ahead without making sure you have a very solid economy means that your empire is also going to topple over, because you have these resources that you need to constantly monitor. These resources are basically multi-use resources. They can represent the different levels of the buildings you manage to have, or they can represent your people and the amount of resources that you can gain for your various different empires. And you are doing your best to make sure that you can evolve your empire over the years to become the grandest empire at the end of 4 ages. Now, Through the Ages is an absolutely fantastic game. This is a very rich game that is a very deep strategy game that plays very well all the way from 2 to 4 players. My personal favorite way to play this game is on the 3 to 4 player count, even though it is still a fantastic game at 2 players. I just enjoy more players because it allows you to be a lot more player interaction, and the wars and everything like that seem to me to have more meaning when I get into the higher 3 and 4 player count. But the only real negative about the game is this is a game that does play longer. This is a game that with inexperienced players, it can very easily take about 4 hours to play. But once everybody gets very experienced, learns the cards, learns the gameplay, understands the basic mechanics of the game, you can probably get a 4-player game in about 2.5 hours. That's not hard to do, especially with very experienced players. This is a game that's very rich, very rewarding, and this is a game that's going to reward experience. This is also one of those games that you may see as a common theme as we go through these top 10 games, where this is a game that's going to reward good experience from a player who has a lot of good knowledge about the game. It is extremely easy, almost as bad as Race for the Galaxy and some of the games in my top 10 list I've already mentioned right here, where it's very easy for an experienced player to absolutely trounce a new player in this game. And I'm not talking about a little trouncing. We're talking about a total domination, because this is a game that rewards skill, experience, and strategy. This is a phenomenal civilization style building game. It's amazing the amount of theme and gameplay that they managed to take just with a simple card game with your open civilization board, still give you the wonderful feeling of building a civilization without playing a dudes on the map style game. That's the game of Through the Ages. Number 5, and dropping down 2 spots from number 3, is going to be the game of Clash of Cultures. Now, Clash of Cultures is an Empire-style game for 2 to 4 players, and this is a game that does often compete with Through the Ages in its placement when you're looking at my top 51 games of all time, because these are 2 fantastic civilization games that take a slightly different approach to the same idea, and they're different enough to be fantastic games that both deserve to be on a top list, but they use the same ideas to create wonderful gameplay. Where Through the Ages is a tableau style building game mixed with an empire building game where you're trying to build up your empire on a board over multiple ages,
Clash of Cultures takes the idea of a dudes on the map game with an empire building game, but reduces this down to a game that's more focused on one special age, where this is the age where you're doing more things such as horseback, things that slowly build up your empire and slowly building up the Age of Sail, and that's basically the idea of this game. So you lose the grand spread of multiple ages, but you replace that with a game that does play differently, and the game of Clash of Cultures is a true empire building game. Now, the game of Clash of Cultures, players are competing to have the best empire at the end of the game, and players are going to have their own personal technology board, and they're going to build up all these technologies. As they build these technologies, they're going to be gaining extra different things for their empire, such as the ability to make their empires larger buildings, the ability to explore, the ability to sail, the ability to build roads, the ability to discover iron. You know, it's the typical things that you would expect for this period. But this is also a dudes on the map style game, because you are also building up your armies, and you're going to use your armies to go out there and conquer the opponents, and you're also going to go out there and conquer the barbarian tribes happening on this world. This game takes a lot of spiritual ideas and a lot of gameplay from the classic PC game of Civilization. Except, like I said, the downfall of this game is that you're not going through multiple ages. It really does focus on one specific age. But where it does focus, this game does so phenomenally well. Clash of Cultures is a wonderful Civilization style building game where you get the full feel of a full civilization, because you do have the fog of war, because you're going to build this map at the beginning of the game, and you have to explore this map to go ahead and reveal it. And the map is going to play out differently every single time you play the game, because you have your waterways, and depending on the way the waterways come out, you may end up being able to build a fleet that allows you to sail around the different build or the war map that you got going on right now. The way you're going to build up your technology is going to decide if you're going to be more warlike or if you're more peaceful, if you're going to have a happy culture or an unhappy culture. You can even start building up wonders, and you even start having things such as different objectives you can get for victory points. You can have events that are going to come up that influence different things, such as plagues. If you don't build up and prepare for the plagues, they may do damage to your empires, and all these different things go together to create a wonderful civilization building game. The way I like to describe Clash of Cultures to people who have never played the game, I basically like to say, hey, have you ever seen the game Civilization on the PC? If you have, take a certain small period out of it, basically the Iron Age, and we're going to play that entire Iron Age as a board game. And when you say it, people go, ooh, that sounds like a lot of fun. And it is. That's the game of Clash of Cultures.
Number 4, and jumping up to number 11, is the game of Terra Mystica. Now, Terra Mystica, you might as well call this as the modern game of chess, because this game is so darn well loved, so darn well respected, and is such a tight, fantastically designed game, much like the classic game of chess. This is a game that is so darn rewarding for gameplay, strategy, and learning the intricacies of the game. The better you learn the game, the better you're going to be at the game, much like the classic game of chess. So the game of Terra Mystica, a game for 2 to 5 players, and don't ever play this as a 2-player game, but this is a game where you're going to pick one of 14 different races. Now, there's more races if you buy the expansions, and yes, I can highly recommend the expansions. They do add to the gameplay. But your basic idea is you are going to pick a race, and you're trying to evolve the planet to whatever landmass type is most beneficial to your race. Because once you evolve the planet, you can start doing things such as building temples, building villages, building all these things in this very, very tight, economical, resource worker placement style game. For example, if you happen to be this race right here, the Alchemist, you are trying to look for this kind of landmass, so you're going to try to evolve the rest of the lands to that specific landmass so you can build on them. Because this is also an area control game. You're trying to gain the most amount of area to get the most amount of victory points to win the game at the end, and you're trying to do this by having your people going out there, building their huts. Maybe you're going to build temples, maybe you're going to build fortresses, maybe you're going to build all these things that allow you to do things that work on the strengths of your race, because this is a very asymmetric game. Every single one of these races plays differently. They have their strengths and they have their weaknesses, and the ultimate objective of the game, even before you start playing the game, is figuring out what everybody else is playing on the board, because every race, much like a rock, paper, scissors, and I'm oversimplifying this way over much, like almost to the point I'm insulting the game, but this game has a rock, paper, scissors feel to it, because some races are better at certain board states than other races. So understanding the current board state and the amount of other races in the game helps you play the game better. Because I didn't mention this yet, but the basic idea of the game is you're going to play out over certain rounds. And every time you set the game, you're going to put out some bonus tiles at the start of the game, and these are going to be randomized. And the way these tiles are going to come out are going to influence what kind of actions every single turn are going to give you bonus victory points. So you want to pick a race that can most efficiently use this track to gain the most amount of victory points, while looking at the other races the other players are playing, because you don't want to play a race
That's against another player where you're fighting over the landmass. Because if you're both sitting there fighting over land masses, the other players who aren't fighting so much over the land masses don't have as much competition, so they're going to be able to get the extra victory points. So there's a lot of deep, rich strategy in this game. And like I said, this is an extremely asymmetric game where you have different things such as power, which is going to allow you to use special powers for your race, and you're going to develop across this land in this wonderful game of worker placement, resource management, and this extremely tight game. I am not kidding when I say this is an extremely tight game. It is very, very possible to play this game and be about round 4 and realize that you have pretty much almost screwed yourself in the future rounds because you have managed to burn all your resources on the wrong spot. You didn't develop a very strong engine, and you didn't anticipate what the other races were doing as they developed the board around you, and you slowly start falling behind. This is a game, again, gonna say this is one of those games that rewards players who are very good at the game. The better you are at this game, the better you're gonna play it. And again, this is one of those games, much like other games I've already mentioned, where if you are not experienced at this game, you're going to get trounced. Because this is a game that rewards experience, this is a game that rewards skill, and this is a game that's gonna get better every single time you play it. That's the game of Terra Mystica.
Number 3, and moving up from number 5, is the game of Dominant Species. A game of pure dominance for up to 6 players, where every single player is going to pick a special species and your only objective is survival through pure dominance over the other players. Because in the game of Dominant Species, you need to evolve and evolve over a planet that is quickly moving towards an ice age. Whoever can evolve and adapt to the planet the best before the end of the game is going to be the grand winner of the game, while the other player is going to fall behind in this plane or in this game of planetary dominance of dominant species. Now, the way this game is going to work is every single player has a race, whether it happens to be your classic birds, reptiles, mammals, insects, amphibians, or arachnids. Arachnids are the best race in the game. No, not really, but they're my favorite anyways. But the basic idea of the game is you are trying to explore across this ever-developing planet that is slowly suffering an ice age. And once the total ice age comes, the game is going to come to an end, because you're going to have this deck of cards in every single round. Some of these cards will be purchased by players, and this deck of cards or this line of cards eventually can be replaced with this final card saying it's the final round of the game and the ice age has come, and that's when the final score is going to be added up. Now, how the game is going to be played is players will be using these action pawns on these various different locations. Once all the players play out their action pawns, we're going to resolve all these action pawns from top to bottom, from left to right. And players are going to take these different actions, such as actions of dominance, actions of attacking other players, actions of evolution, which means you're going to evolve your species, because what I haven't mentioned yet is every single one of these species can only live on a landmass that they have evolved to go ahead and live on. For example, the birds need to be on a landmass that has this kind of evolution on it. The reptiles need to be on a landmass that has this kind of evolution on it. They have to have this kind of thing for the mammals. You get the basic idea. But if the landmass is not a landmass that you're adapted to, you cannot live on this landmass, and then your species is going to slowly die off. Another interesting thing about this game is if your species happen to die off, not only are they removed from the board, they're actually removed from the game. So your species are a very limited supply, so you need to smartly evolve as you play this game. Because if you fail to evolve, and if the land masses slowly start evolving away from what you're adapted to live on, you're slowly going to go extinct. So you need to play this game smart with the way the action selections are going. As the planet itself is slowly discovered, whether it has to be land masses, water masses, oh, this would be funny if I keep trying water masses, forest masses, more savanna, all these different things, because the landmass is going to keep adapting, and you're going to be drawing from this bag, which is going to have these different extra things, which is going to show what that specific landmass is adapted to. So if you're adapted to that landmass, you can move in. If you're not adapted to that landmass, you cannot move in, and you're going to gain victory points at the end of this game by having dominance over the total planet. Remember, this is a game about dominance because you are trying to become the most dominant species. Whoever's the most dominant species at the end of the game is going to be the grand winner in this game, Dominant Species. Number 2, moving up from number 9, is the truest game of fantasy football, and that is going to be the game of Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl is a miniature style game where every single player is going to pick a team. And this is a true fantasy game because every single player is going to pick a traditional fantasy race, whether it's a team of orcs, whether it's a team of undead, halflings, lizardmen, humans. Well, you probably have seen every one of these races if you played any fantasy game ever before. But the basic idea is the players are using their miniatures to play what is basically a game of fantasy football. Now, the game of Blood Bowl has been around for a long, long time. Matter of fact, the game of Blood Bowl has been around for well over 30 years now. And this game has continued to evolve. Matter of fact, we have the brand new edition that just came out in 2020, which is the first edition after over 30 years, which actually modified the rules a little bit. And I think the modification to the rules is actually what helped elevate this game a little bit higher on my list, because what they've done is they've added an extra stat to the game, which allowed some of these races to play a little bit better and allows them to have a little more variety and a lot more fun in the basic game of Blood Bowl. But the basic idea of the game of Blood Bowl is this is, like I said, is a miniatures game, and players are going to be playing the classic game of football. Everybody knows how to play football. The basic objective of the game is to get the football, run the game down, and run the ball into the end zone and score victory points, and that's what's going to happen. The trick here is that this is an ultra-violent version of football, because in this game, a Blood Bowl, it's quite convenient, and it may be even a good strategy for some of the races. Instead of trying to run the ball into the end zone, it may be a good idea just to knock out the other players, and if you knock out enough of the other players, then you can run the ball into the end zone. Now, Blood Bowl is a game that is going to be very rewarding for players who continue to play the game, understand the intricacies of their team, the intricacies of the teams they're playing against, and also understand the concept of playing variables and playing the dice in your favor. Because in the game of Blood Bowl, you can take as many actions as you want on your side with every single one of your players, because your miniatures are called players, but every one of your players can take one action. And you can keep taking actions as long as you want, unless you fail. If any of your actions fail, your turn is immediately going to end and it goes over to the other player's turn. So this creates a very strong feeling of a game where you are playing the game to play versus your strengths and hedging your bets and avoiding taking the riskiest moves until you just have to do it. So, for example, you may take actions that have the highest guaranteed chance of success, and you work through those kind of actions and slowly work towards the actions that may potentially cause a turnover. Because, like I said, if the dice are ever not in your favor, and if you ever fail an action, your turn is immediately going to end. It's immediately the other player's turn. And this can be things such as throwing the ball, failing to throw the ball, knocking over players, trying to tackle other players, trying to do such things as moving out of another player's tackle zone. All these different things can cause you to fail at your actions that you're trying to do. So this game, on the surface, looks like a very simple game that's playing fantasy football. But this game is extremely rich and extremely deep, and the tactics and the strategies is truly about understanding the probabilities and hedging the risks in your benefit and your favor. And one of the most fantastic things about the game Blood Bowl is this is a game that you're going to play throughout a league. And when you're playing this game as a league play, you're going to start off with your basic team. Every player is going to start with the team. They're going to buy their team. Usually players can choose like 1 million credits to buy their team. They're going to get their various positions, their players, and everything along those lines. And your team is going to evolve throughout the season. You may end up getting star players. Your players may get better. You may suffer some fatalities. You may suffer some injuries. And your team is going to evolve throughout the year. Whoever makes it to the end and enters the final football, or as this game, the Blood Bowl tournament, representing our Super Bowl. But as soon as the first 2 teams get into the Blood Bowl tournament, whoever ends up being the winner is going to be the grand winner of the season. Now, this game has a wonderful amount of variety, a wonderful amount of replay. This is one of those games that's extremely enjoyable to play, whether you are really dedicated and want to play through a full season of the gameplay, or if you just want to play one-off games. It's a very enjoyable game. It's fun strategically, fun tactically, and it's a heck of a lot of a lot of enjoyment. That's the game of Blood Bowl. And now we get to number 1. Now, for me, for a game to be the number 1 game of all time, at least in my opinion, it has to do a lot of things. One, it has to play in multiple player counts. It has to be a game that's going to offer a deep, rich strategy. It's got to be a game that you're going to be able to play multiple times over and over and over again. It's got to be a game that's going to reward strategy. It's got to be a game that rewards tactics, and it's got to be a game that rewards player interaction. A game for me to be a top game of all time has to do all these things. And number 1 in my top 51 games of all time, and number 1 at the last time I did this, it was Space Empires 4X. Very, very strongly remaining number 1 because it does all of those things I just mentioned and more. Now, the game of Space Empires 4X is basically, this is a Civilization style game in space. And this game does play anywhere from 1 to 8 players. And no, I personally would not play this game as an 8-player game unless I was planning on spending an entire weekend with my friends. But this is a game that is so rich and so deep and offers so much gameplay variety every single time you play the game. The basic idea of Space Empires 4X is this is a Civilization style game, like I said, in space, where you are going to take your simple empire and you are going to evolve throughout the gameplay, whether it's by a tech tree, whether it's by exploration, or whether it's by interaction with the other players, and your eventual objective is just to wipe out the other players. Now, at the start of the game, you are going to seed the board, which is one of the first things that's so awesome about this game. It means that this game is going to play differently every single time you play it, because you're going to seed the board with your interpersonal galaxy, and every single player is going to seed the board with an interpersonal
interpersonal galaxy. And you don't know what your interpersonal galaxy looks like until you start exploring. And you may run into different things such as nebulas, or you may run into different things such as disasters, or you may even run into things such as places that you mine to get resources. You may find other planets, you may find all these other things, but you're not going to go until you explore your galaxy. And then before you can start going against the other players and enter the other players' galaxies, you need to explore deep space, which is going to be randomly set up with this random set of tokens right here, which also has different things to encounter. And you are going to have to develop your empire in a rich, smart way, because you need to start building up your empire with a special tech tree. And this tech tree is going to allow you to do things such as evolve your spaceship. It's going to allow you to evolve your empire, allow you to do different things, and it's allow you to get different kind of technologies. And every time you play this game, you can evolve your technologies and your tech trees differently every single time you play the game. And just to give you an idea of how much I play this game and how much fun I have with this game, I actually went out there and I laminated all the player sheets right here. That way I can reuse them by using dry erase markers, because that way you can just circle everything, modify your empires, and after you're done playing the game, just wipe it out. Hey, you're ready to start playing the game all over again. But this is a game that offers rich strategic tactics, and this is a game that allows 100% player interaction. Heck, the only way you win the game is by obliterating another player. So it goes to show you that this game offers direct player interaction. But this game does so many things that you can only find in classic PC games, and it manages to bring all that wonderful gameplay into a board game experience. Now, the game does offer scenarios that allow you to play cooperatively. This game offers you scenarios that allows you to play fully competitively. This game offers you scenarios that allows you to play the game solo versus an AI, and there's multiple different AIs, and there's multiple different expansions. As a matter of fact, there's another expansion that's actually in the P500 right now, and it actually succeeded in the P500. So once the game is produced, it's going to come out to all the people who supported it, and that's going to be the final expansion for the game. But every single expansion adds so much more to the game. Right now, I'm just showing you the very basic box for the game here, Space Empires 4X. But the first expansion adds in extra different things, such as scenarios, all these different things, extra rules, and more to this game. This is just one of those games that what I like to describe as a lifestyle game, because this is a game that you can play for years and years and years and years, and you will never get bored of this game. If you like a Space Empire style game, if you like a 4X style game, if you like a game that's all about player interaction, that offers you a technology tree, offers the fog of war, offers exploration, and is a true 4X, not one of these pretender 3.5X or these 3X games that like to claim they're 4X games. No, this is a 100% 4X game that allows you to explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate, because this is a true 4X game. That is Space Empires 4X, my #1 game of all time. I hope you enjoyed this video series looking at my top 51 games of all time. And I think it's pretty easy to see the kind of game style that I really like, and that's one of the fun things about doing a top 51 games of all time list. It allows you to look at the kind of games you like, the style of games you like, and the kind of interaction you like. Obviously, for me, it's very much about empire building games are one of the things I very much enjoy. Player interaction is something that's very, very important to me. And also games that offer a deep, rich amount of strategy. For me, a game that you're going to master after 1 or 2 plays is not a game that's going to be really high up on my list. I like games that offer a lot of replay variety, a lot of strategy, a lot of tactics, and a lot of depth of gameplay. Matter of fact, it looks like I'm actually even not really much a big a fan of the Cult of the New. Yeah, when you start looking at the list, there are some games that manage to make it up pretty darn high, but these are games that meet so many qualities that are just absolutely mandatory when it comes to me when it's looking at fantastic gameplay. One of the highest jumping games that joined the list this year is actually the game Nemo's War. Now, Nemo's War, just talking about style of gameplay, Nemo's War is a game that is very deep, very rich, and offers a lot of gameplay. So even though it's a new game to the list, it's obviously a game that is just really so well designed. Looking over the list, you can see lots of games that offer a lot of rich variety, lots of player interaction, and lots of rich depth. It's fun to do a top 51 games list of all time. It's a lot of fun to look over the games, and obviously this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because even though I'm saying the top 51 games of all time, it's really saying the top 51 games that I've ever played. There's lots of fantastic games out there that could possibly be on the list, and this is where I'm looking for a little bit of feedback from you. If you see a game or you know a game that you think I might be interested in, go ahead and leave some comments down below. Mention some games that may meet some of the criteria that I may be interested in. I love interaction. I love games that allow you to have rich, deep strategy. I love games that allow you to build up tech trees, and games that offer a lot of rich gameplay variety, and games that you need to play multiple times to get the richness out of those games. If you think of any games like that, mention them in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, as always, leave them down below in the YouTube comments. I'll be sure to answer them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me at off-the-shelf-board-game-reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll be sure to get your email as quickly as I can. If you enjoy this video channel, you enjoy the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just one little dollar in the tip jar can help me keep more content coming out to you. Remember, this channel is 100% self-sponsored and self-supported. Your money and your support over on Patreon and even just sharing the channel with others can help me with the YouTube analytics. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. And as always, thanks for watching.